Welcome everybody. I'm going to just do a few housekeeping notes just at the beginning. Q&A is going to be held at the end of the session, so please use the chat room to post any questions. Like I said, the slides will be sent to you as a PDF with the recording. So please you'll get that along with the feedback form tomorrow. So just leaves me to welcome our speakers. We've got Laurie Duggan, who literally is our US market access lead. She's got over 35 years of experience in health economics and market access, and has a vast range of knowledge within the medical device sector. Following Laurie will be Michael Procillo, who is also the managing partner at ValueGen. He's a healthcare business leader with over 30 years of experience. So he's got again vast degree of knowledge for the sector that we're all involved in. Following Michael will be Ian Smith, who is the founder of Surreal and a strategic brand advisor at Vital for Growth. So he's got over 20 years of experience in the medtech marketing and commercial strategy. So very much a lead in the marketing and brand sector. And finally, our not last or least is our speaker, Jamie Foster, who's a partner at Hill Dickinson. He's specialising in the health and life sciences sector, and we're delighted that Hill Dickinson is also the venue partner for the event itself in London. So thank you very much for them for hosting us in April. So it gives me my great pleasure to hand over to Laurie, so who will now present, and over to Laurie.
Good morning. All right, I want to know, are we seeing the 5 questions slide?
All good, Laurie.
Yes. Okay, wonderful. All right. Good morning, or actually it's good morning for me because I'm in the US, and good afternoon for all of you. I want to welcome all of you. And today's webinar is not about CPT or HCPCS codes or inclusion into commercial insurance policies. It's about whether or not your company is going to actually survive and scale in the US. The 5 top questions you should be thinking about when you're deciding whether or not you're going to enter into the US market. 1, why do technically strong medtech companies still fail in the US? Who actually decides adoption in the US? And when does that decision really happen? What moment truly determines whether adoption accelerates or stalls? What actually changes behavior at that critical moment? And what is marketing's real role in making market access work? I want you to focus on these questions as we go through this presentation, please. So this slide looks pretty simple, but it's where most companies break down. In the US, market access, physician strategy, and marketing strategy cannot be built in isolation. If even one of these is misaligned, adoption will stall. Market access defines how a system pays. If payment is unclear or creates friction, nothing else really matters. Physician strategy defines who can actually use it and champion the product. Physicians adopt when economics work and when workflow fits and value is clear, not because of branding or enthusiasm. And I must say, this is a commonplace mistake that happens many times. Marketing strategy defines how the story is told. If marketing promises outcomes that reimbursement, hospital, and physicians cannot support, credibility is quickly lost. Most failed launches don't lack innovation, they lack alignment. In the US, success happens only when these 3 are designed together from the very beginning. All right, so this slide looks fairly simple, but this is where most companies break down. In the US, market access, physician strategy, and marketing strategy cannot be built in isolation. If even one of these is misaligned, adoption completely stalls. Market access defines how the system pays. If payment is unclear, it creates friction, nothing else matters. Physician strategy defines who and how they can actually use the champion the product. Physicians adopt when the economics actually work, when the workflow fits and value is very clear, not because of branding or enthusiasm. Marketing strategy defines the story as it's told. If marketing promises outcomes that reimbursement, hospitals, or physicians cannot support, credibility is quickly lost. Most failed launches don't lack innovation, they lack alignment. In the US, success happens only when these three are completely aligned. Sorry, I'm struggling a little bit with the advancement. Okay, so I'm sorry. So many founders and frankly, many investors believe that securing a new CPT or HCPCS code is a reimbursement milestone. In reality, an administrative milestone is all that it really is. It's not a commercial milestone. From an investment standpoint, new codes introduce timeline risk, capital risk, and adoption risk all at once. The process routinely takes 2 to 4 years, and that's before you see meaningful outcomes or utilization. During this time, companies are funding clinical evidence, policy strategy, stakeholder advocacy, and consultant ecosystems, all while generating little to no scalable revenue. Even after a code is approved, payment is not guaranteed. Coverage decisions are local, inconsistent, and slow. Hospitals and physicians may still lack financial incentive to adopt. For investors, this is a critical point. A new code does not de-risk the business. It often increases the burn rate while extending time to liquidity. This is why many venture-backed healthcare companies stall, not because the technology failed, but because the reimbursement strategy consumed capital without creating adoption. A code can be part of your strategy, but it should never be mistaken as the strategy. The bottom line, a US code enables billing. It does not enable reimbursement or utilization. Another common assumption is that hiring a senior sales executive early de-risks commercialization. The thinking is they have relationships, therefore the relationships will drive adoption. From a VC's lens, this is where capital is mainly misallocated. Market access is relationship driven, make no mistake, but relationships are only durable when the economics work. Physicians don't adopt because they like the rep. This is a common mistake that happens even within US companies. They adopt when the technology makes sense, both financially and operationally. Even strong physician relationships break down if the technology is hard to sell internally to a hospital, implementation disrupts workflow, training is burdensome, or reimbursement creates friction as opposed to ease to income. Sales leaders can open your doors, but they cannot overcome weak unit economics, unclear payment pathways, or hospital resistance. For investors, the takeaway is very important. Sales should accelerate proven demand. It should not manufacture it. It comes after the beginning strategy begins. Hiring sales before reimbursement, clarity, and operational simplicity are established often increases a burn without the traction you need, which directly impacts your capital efficiency and follow-through viability. Again, the bottom line on this is that sales will scale your adoption, but they do not create your adoption. In the US, this is a very common mistake. Companies often build their sales strategies around the KOLs and top academic centers, assuming that publications and prestige will equal or drive adoption. In reality, many of the prestigious hospitals are the hardest places to sell. They have restrictive value analysis committees. They have long decision cycles and very limited reimbursement flexibility. Despite their reputation, they are extremely price sensitive. Many of these teaching institutions are high Medicaid providers, and so their price sensitivity is generally due to that. Publications create credibility, not utilization. They do not unlock contracts, budgets, or purchasing approval. By contrast, community and mid-tier health systems often move much faster. They make decisions locally, and they adopt when economics work. In the US, commercial readiness is regional, not reputational. The most successful strategies separate KOL and evidence generation from commercial rollout. The bottom line, prestige will build your reputation, but it does not guarantee your access. So here we'll take a quick case study. We've got a fictional company, Atlas Prime Medical, and we're going to look at the myth versus the reality in action. So the profile, they raised about 6.5 million in seed. They have FDA clearance. They have strong clinical outcomes, top tier physician interest, and they're beginning to pursue a new CPT strategy. This profile is consistent amongst probably 70% of the companies I work with. The myth-driven strategy, which is the current strategy for most companies, is that they're pursuing the new CPT code first. They've hired a VP of sales early. They assume physician enthusiasm will equal adoption, and they expect reimbursement will eventually catch up with the different activities they're working on. The result, and this is very typical, it's about a 30-month burn rate with minimal utilization. Sales will stall at hospital committees, physician disengagement due to friction, and follow-on funding will be delayed. The reality-driven pivot, which we will be recommending in April, is that you're going to leverage existing payment pathways. You're going to simplify hospital economics. You'll reduce implementation burden, align physician income early, and you're going to use sales to scale, not create demand. Your outcome will be measurable adoption under 12 months, lower burn rate with clear unit economics, and a stronger Series A narrative. This is a pattern investors see repeatedly. Atlas didn't fail because the technology was weak. It failed because the commercialization strategy assumed the policy approval and sales relationships would solve adoption. Once the company pivoted to near-term payment logic and operational simplicity, adoption followed without waiting years for policy alignment. This is why understanding market access early on is materially important and impacts valuation, dilution, and time to liquidity. Apologies, I'm trying to get to the next slide. There we go. All right, so this course is not theory. Many courses that you attend will be very high level and theory driven. This is going to be your commercial blueprint. The program exists because many European technologies fail in the US, not due to science, but due to a system misunderstanding. If you're planning on US entry, it's about clarity, efficiency, and avoiding costly missteps. If this resonates, the 2-day program will go deeper, practical, candid, and designed for execution.
We've lost the deck, Claire. Can you pull it back on screen?
Yeah, I know. Just put it back.
That was probably my mistake. Thought I was handing it over. My apologies.
Okay, right, let me go back to where you were. Okay, so Michael, if you'd like to take back control, lovely, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Laurie. Welcome, everybody. What I'm going to add now is around education. But importantly, I've got to say is that what my part of this and for the seminar in the future is dependent that you've got the other part that Laurie was talking about correct. So yes, you've got your FDA approval. Yes, you've understood your CPT codes, but importantly, you've built really good VAC, value analysis committee dossiers, because everything I'm going to say related to education driving adoption is immaterial unless the VAC has approved the product in the hospital. But most medtech startups believe adoption is a marketing problem. If customers are aware, informed, and interested, adoption should follow. This session challenges that assumption because adoption doesn't fail at awareness, it fails at behavior. And the companies that understand this early on actually can turn education into a real competitive advantage. Remember this number, 4.3. I'm going to come back to it later on in my talk. But here's the real default startup mindset. And most companies think along these lines, that messaging equals learning, that training equals education, and awareness equals adoption. These assumptions feel logical and they're incredibly common, but the real truth is they undermine adoption, especially in complex, risk-sensitive areas like medtech. So the hard truth is this: knowing is not the same as doing, interest doesn't create confidence, and promotion doesn't change behavior. Adoption fails not because the product or people don't understand the product, but because the behavior doesn't change when it matters most. So what do I mean by this? Well, the real dangerous user is not the uninformed skeptic. It's actually the well-informed, highly interested, but unprepared. Somebody, a user who hesitates on their first use. They stall, they delay, and quietly adoption slows without anybody realizing why. And let me be clear, winning early pioneers is relatively easy. Startups fail even after winning their first customers when they fail to achieve a tipping point of users to create the inertia to cross that chasm into profitable customers, the early majority. Education is your accelerator, and I'm going to show why. So, adoption doesn't fail during marketing or training. It fails at the first real use, that moment when the user thinks, what if I got this wrong? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt show up exactly when behaviors matters most. Delivering the right behavior, changing learning, is critical to changing that adoption curve from a normal curve, which may take years, to a Poisson curve. And it's worth millions of pounds, dollars, and euros to get this right. So this core category error is marketing creates interest, intent, education enables execution. Marketing persuades, but education builds competence and confidence. Confusing the two leads to a beautiful launch, but slow, fragile adoption. Education only succeeds if the first users act confidently on their first use, perform safely under real conditions, and repeat correct behavior without external reference or rescue. If behavior doesn't change, education won't happen, no matter how good the content is. Remember the 4.3? Well, actually, that 4.3 represented 4.3 million euros of lost opportunity in the first 2 years post-launch when a startup misses when adoption stalls. Not because the product failed, but because behavior never changed at first use. The right education will change competence, behavior, outcomes, imprinting, positioning, and even your company's culture, which ultimately leads to a change in patient safety, clinical performance, customer engagement, value generation, and your return on investment. So education is not support. It's not a cost center. It's strategic infrastructure. It's a mechanism by which behavior changes, and behavior change is what unlocks adoption, value, and growth. Companies that get this right avoid the hidden cost of slow adoption. Companies that don't often lose millions before they realize why. In our seminar in April, what I'm hoping to show you are the right ways to develop an education program that changes the game. So by the end of that seminar, you'll be able to define what education actually blocks adoption, explain what learning truly changes behavior, and examine the building blocks of great learning experiences. And ideally, avoid missing out on those 4.3 million euros or pounds in extra revenues in those first 2 years by doing things right. So in summary, education is the mechanism by which behaviors change. And behavior change is what unlocks adoption, value, and growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Over to you, Ian. You might want to come off mute, Ian.
I noticed I was muted. I spotted it straight away. Thanks, Claire. Hi, everyone. Why marketing matters in market access and making adoption feel safe. All right, that's the sector that I'm going to be covering really, and what people think marketing is and what it really should be. And I think that's one of the key areas that we'll quickly review today, but I think the 2-day course will really delve into this. And I think one of my favourite analogies in any marketing sector is the three-legged stool. And with Laurie and Michael, you know, really what we're covering there is market access, physician strategy, and the marketing strategy. And we see firsthand on many occasions how burnout can happen by bringing sales and marketing in too early with the wrong message, or alternatively, you know, they bring it in too late as we move forward. And so as we sort of jump through these, you know, why marketing matters in market access. You know, most medtech teams think marketing sits at the end of the process. You know, fundamentally that's what they do. And really, oh well, once we've got reimbursement in place, now let's start telling everybody about what it is. But actually, in reality, marketing starts much earlier. Market access is not just about whether something can be paid for, it's about whether people feel confident enough to change behaviour. And I think that's one of the areas that, as I say, experience tells us we see this failing on a number of occasions, because if adoption never begins, no amount of coding or coverage will save the strategy. So marketing role is to create the conditions where adoption becomes the possibility. And I know Laurie mentioned it and Michael mentioned it, and as I say, I'm the third part of this stool. However, all of them are integrated and need to work together. So awareness is not adoption, and that's something that Michael and Laurie both brought up in their slides. You know, being known does not mean being used. Awareness answers, have you heard of us? I heard of you.
Sorry, Ian, do you have access to his slides? That's it. Because they weren't moving.
Oh, right. There must be a time delay, Claire. Sorry about that. So
All right,
awareness
lovely,
is not
thank you.
adoption, you know. So, and that's, as you can see there, being known does not mean being used. Awareness answers, have they heard of you? Adoption answers, do they trust this enough to use it, bill it, and defend it internally? And so awareness is often mistaken for success. Being known doesn't mean being used. And adoption only happens when clinicians and administrators feel safe enough to act, bill, and defend the decisions internally. And most market access strategies don't fail loudly. They quietly stall in the gap between awareness and actual use. And that gap is where marketing either works properly, or it doesn't. And I think we see that on many occasions with the messaging, the wrong messaging put out. So if you can see the next slide there, which is the invisible barriers to adoption. You know, long before reimbursement's fully sorted, decisions have already been made at a human level. you know, what they're actually, you think you're out there pushing out, but clinicians are thinking about the workflow disruption, administrators are thinking about billing risk and staff burden, and these concerns are rarely voiced openly, but they strongly influence behaviour. And if those silent objections aren't surfaced and addressed in your marketing, adoption slows and stops, regardless of how strongly economics look on paper. And I think as we identify these, as we push forward, you know, marketing job is to surface and resolve these silent objections. And a lot of people think marketing is, oh, we'll do a sales sheet or we'll tell them about this. And as we can, as one of the things that we'll be talking about as we move forward, is actually this is what brand storytelling is about in medtech, and it's something that, you know, Surreal and Vital, we've been pushing across the medtech sector, and you might have seen this across a number of the big players now, how Medtronic are talking about Able, how Smith and Nephew were talking about real intelligence. What they're actually talking about with brand storytelling, it's not slogans or sentiment, it's not an old man holding his granddaughter in a photograph, it's not how we push these things out. Actually, brand storytelling is much deeper, and the statistics to show this, you know, what they actually, one of the things that they talk about on a regular basis, just 2 seconds, because I had something on my screen there and I accidentally clicked forward. You know, igniting growth in medtech and using brand storytelling, it's now a proven tactic within medtech marketing. With emotionally engaged storytelling, you can get a 306% higher lifetime value from emotionally connected customers, and that comes from Google. 92% more engagement with the storytelling content if you were pushing that out there as opposed to just pushing a sales sheet, and a 30% increased conversion rates with effective storytelling marketing. But as I say, the misconception is often brand storytelling is actually, or we put a picture of a granddaughter and saying you can now move credibly because you've had a hip operation, and it's so wrong. And brand storytelling medtech is so misunderstood. And as I say, it's not about slogans, it's about clarity. It's about good narrative that explains why the technology exists, how it fits into real practice, what risks it removes, and why early use is sensible and defendable. So strong storytelling doesn't persuade people to take a leap. It reduces the feeling that they're taking a leap. And I think that's where things often get mixed up within the marketing sector. As you say, so many people use exactly the same toolkit, and there's a lot of noise in the sector. And this is really how you create that difference. So why it matters in the local US market, and I think this is one of the big misconceptions, and I was guilty of this very early on when I did medtech marketing. Everybody thinks, oh, let's target the US. And actually, the US health system is not one market. It is a lot of markets. It's everything pulled together. And I think if you don't identify this early, and I know it's something that Michael majors on a lot when he delves a lot deeper into this, but the US healthcare system, it's not one market, it's hundreds of local healthcare economies, each with different payer rules, each with different hospital dynamics, and each with different incentives. So what feels safe and sensible in one city can feel risky in another. So one marketing message isn't going to cover you to cover the US market. And a single global message rarely survives the reality of pushing out there. So marketing helps translate the strategy into local believable stories that support adoption in each context. But actually at the same time, people think one deck covers everything from investors to the message to the product. And you really have to approach these things with a completely different mindset. And this is how building a brand story sort of rolls this one out. So the role of marketing in the winning sequence really is critical. All right. As we can see there, you cannot market your way out of bad economics, but you can also scale economics that people don't emotionally trust. So it's true that you can market your way out of it, but the opposite really is true. You can't scale good economics if people don't trust them emotionally. And as we mentioned with those statistics, if you can create this emotional connection to the end user, even via distributors, even via everyone else, if you get a good story that pushes it out and shows people why having the message right really does change behavior. So really marketing connects market access strategy with the real world behaviors of what you're going to get out of it. It helps turn economic logic into something clinicians and administrators feel confident about acting on. And that's why marketing isn't decoration, it's part of a system that enables market access. And I think if you pull these together, really what you end up with is the final slide, which is about brand storytelling. Isn't about telling people who you are. It's about making adoption feel safe, sensible, and defendable. And so what you leave from my section within the course really is a clear understanding of why awareness does not equal adoption. You know, why being known in medtech rarely changes behaviour, and where confidence is actually won and lost. We'll show you insights into real fears that block clinical adoption. We'll cover a new definition of what medtech storytelling is, not messaging or promotion, but a narrative system that makes adoption feel safe, sensible, and defensible. We'll identify clarity on where marketing truly matters in market access. And finally, a way to reduce friction before sales ever begin. And I think that's, you know, yet again, we see that we weighted a lot where people put a lot of money in VPs of sales and marketing at the very early stages when often they don't even have a product to sell. So that really the burnout of money is extensive when we push these across. So my final slide there is brand storytelling in MadTech isn't about telling people who you are. It's about making adoption feel safe, sensible, and defensible. All right. And on that note, I'll pass over to Jamie. Jamie, I think this will be your slides moving forward. So thanks, everyone.
You've done it again. Hang on, I have to re-put it in.
I never touched the button, Claire, so that one wasn't me.
No, that's all right. Okay. Let me get Jamie's.
We'll quickly review these slides so you don't forget.
Okay, Jamie, if you'd like to take control.
Thanks very much, Claire. Thank you, Michael. Thank you to all the contributors for excellent talks. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Jamie Foster, a partner at Hill Dickinson. We're an international law firm with a large focus on the health and life sciences sectors. We support a lot of medtech, health tech, digital health businesses on international expansion plans, including when they're looking to go into the US. Important to note that although we're an international firm, we don't have offices in the US, and we work in the US through partner firms. So what I wanted to do just very briefly was to touch on a couple of points that we see again and again as being particularly relevant in terms of getting your business market ready from a legal perspective before tackling the US market. And you know, there are obvious reasons why everybody's interested in the US market. And for clients who are UK based, we find that it comes up again and again. So just a few points here to note from me. The first is making sure that you understand whether your corporate structure as it is at the moment is suitable for entering into the US market. It may be that you have, say, a UK company, but you haven't considered whether that structure will work well in terms of selling directly into the US. So, for example, there's a well-known corporate restructuring model called the Delaware Flip, where a new holding company is effectively set up in the US, and that's often seen as an important way of tackling the US market. Linked to that, of course, is tax and the need to consider the tax implications of generating income in an overseas market like the US. So don't assume that your existing corporate structure will allow you to tackle the US in the best possible way. Give some thought to whether it needs adjusting to do so. Linked to that is how you plan to work in the US. And this is particularly relevant if you are going to need some presence on the ground. So whether that's employing people locally, or perhaps considering whether you as a founder or any of your staff need to go and base themselves in the US. And if so, then immigration requirements become particularly relevant. So again, something to consider at the outset, and there are tax implications, of course, to that as well. It may be that in the first instance, none of that is necessary and exploratory conversations happen without the need to do so. Then there's regulation, of course. So if you have a medical device, software as a medical device, you may have UK CA marked product or CE marked product, but not yet an FDA registered product. And in that case, bearing in mind that there's no direct equivalence between the MHRA and the FDA, you need to consider whether you need to go and or how you proceed with an FDA registration for placing a product on the market in the US. Linked to that is data protection. Of course, the UK and the US have different laws. UK data protection law is actually updating this year, and the rules around transfers of data out of the UK are being updated as well. So you need to consider local US data protection laws in whichever state you're going into, and federal laws, and how that impacts data that will flow between the two countries. And then a couple of things that are less to do with specific US legal and regulatory systems, but more just general common sense matters, is to make sure that you have a firm grip on the intellectual property that you have in your business, that it's appropriately protected in a way that can then allow you to exploit it. So, for example, a relatively common model we see is a UK business going over to work with one of the US hospital groups. The US hospital group will work with them, will allow them to conduct research on some of their patents in return for equity participation in the business. And in that case, you need to understand what your IP is and how it's contributing to the collaboration. But again, if you just want to go and place a product in the US market, you need to understand that you've got the right patent or appropriate IP protection to do so. And then, of course, you're likely to have a contract somewhere down the line. It may be a license of IP. It might be some form of joint venture, a simple supply and distribution arrangements. And in all of those cases, the contract, if drafted in the US, may look slightly different to what you're used to in the UK. You're likely to be able to interpret most of the commercial terms yourself without local law input. But there will definitely be terms in there that do need a good US lawyer to take a look at them. So just be aware that if you're being presented with documents to sign, they will likely be governed by the law of the state that you're operating in, and you'll need to make sure that you've covered that off from a legal perspective in terms of understanding what the contract means under the relevant US law. So that's a very brief introduction, but really just a placeholder to say, do just make sure you've got on your checklist these legal issues before you, or as part of your process in going off and tackling the US. And that's it from me.
Lovely, thank you, Jamie. You've just got a couple more slides, but I think that's just obviously about Hilda itself. So everybody can read those when they get the slide deck. So just a brief overview of the two-day masterclass that we'll be holding in April. So 29th to 30th of April, as I mentioned at the beginning, very kindly held at Hill Dickinson's offices at Broadgate Tower, just in the city near Liverpool Street. So it's a full-day, two-day programme, which is designed to give the UK and European healthcare innovators from startups right through to Series A and B companies, giving you the best possible chance of entering and scaling in the US market. So today's briefing webinar is really just like a brief snapshot of what's going to be covered over the 2 days. Just so everybody's aware, we've got an early bird offer until the 30th of January. You can see there, if you're SEHTA member, it's 1,200 plus VAT, non-members at 1,600 plus VAT. And we're also going to hold a networking dinner on the first night for all attendees. So when you get the slides, you've got the QR code there to scan in and register your interest. So that's all there. So that just leaves me to hand over to you guys, the attendees. If you've got any questions, if there's any questions in the chat, or if you'd like to post any questions to the speakers, please use this time wisely. Sandra, Ian, you're holding your hand up.
Yeah, just one quick one as well. This was a very rapid run through of what the 2-day course would be, and I guarantee you that I've worked with Laurie and Michael. Jamie, I know you're new to me, but when we work together on a 2-day presentation like this, it is not death by PowerPoint. It is not simple slides. We are very, very interactive. We've all got vast experience in running courses, and so it would be exciting. There will be fun elements, and you will walk away with a lot to do. So please don't see the simple slide decks that we've pushed through today as being a representation of it is not a death by PowerPoint conference that we would be running on this. It would be very much interactive, so you guys would go away with something of great value to your business to really help you get access to the US.
And I want to add on to that each individual company will walk away with an individualized blueprint. So there will be breakouts. So we'll do overviews, but then there will be breakouts that will dig into your specifics, where you are in the life cycle of your commercialization, and then how we can implement an actionable blueprint for you to walk away with.
So back to
Lovely.
questions, Claire.
At the moment, we actually don't have any questions. So I take that as a lovely silence that everybody is very comfortable with what's been delivered today. Obviously, if there are any questions that you feel that you want to ask, you know where I am, both myself and Sandra. You can just drop us an email once you've seen the slide deck and listened to the recording again, and I'll happily post any of the questions onto the speakers. So just leaves me to obviously just, quick reminder about the actual event in April, and to thank all the speakers for their time today. And thank you very much for joining, and I hope you have a good rest of the evening or the afternoon, and or Laurie for the morning, and hopefully see most of you in April. It'll be lovely.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.